What's up, guys, and welcome back to Fanboy Talks. Thank you so much for checking out this video. If you guys haven't already, make sure you watch my other video that I put out earlier this week. It was my GameStop, some of the GameStop like stories that I have where customers were kind of douchebags or just weird shit happened. I thought it was kind of interesting. I actually got like a couple comments on that one saying that it sounds like working at GameStop isn't that bad, and I was like, no, it's really not. As long as you have a manager that's not going to try to fuck people over, you'll be fine, which today's video will illustrate that. I had two great managers that I loved, and I'm going to talk about a manager today who was just, I'm going to call him Meatball because I don't want to say his name, but he was like the human personification of a garbage pail kid. Like, he was the worst, and he also definitely looked like a meatball. It was really interesting. The resemblance was uncanny. But obviously, if you haven't noticed, this is another GameStop video. This one is about shit that happened because I was an employee, or just it's not necessarily about bad customers. It's about bad managers and just weird business practices that happened. Understand, GameStop is not a bad place to really like shop. I mean, they're a corporation, so they're as bad as corporations can get. They're as bad as Walmart is and everything like that, but it's not terrible. Don't hate the people who work there. They work there. That's just what they do. They might just love video games, and that's why they work there. That's why I worked there for such a long time, just over 2.5 years, because I loved talking about video games, and I love talking to customers, and just being around video game culture was amazing. I ended up quitting mostly, I mean, I might get into that in this video. For the most part, it was just because I wanted to be a gamer again, and I didn't want to be a game salesman anymore. So yeah, this is going to be another GameStop video. Obviously, kind of forgot to say, my name is Vaughn Hyde. I'm basically the only one on this channel for the most part, with the exception of You Guys Made Me Inc. Make sure you guys check out those. They post every Monday. I will put a link for our SoundCloud down below. You can also just check them out. I might put a annotation at the end of this video, but I'm not 100% sure. So I've got basically like 4 key points I wanted to hit on today, and then just however much I may ramble in between. First, I would like to get into, I was watching a video the other day. I forget what it was called. It was like, dude, really? Or yeah, this happened. Something like that, where this guy, I subscribed to the channel, but I totally forgot what it's called. It's about this guy's like actual experiences, and this was when he was trying to buy the Nintendo Switch, and he was basically just talking about what had happened when he went to buy the Nintendo Switch from GameStop. What happened to him was fucked up. It never should have happened. The manager in this story was he was a huge dick. He was like misleading this guy, telling him that they could only sell them in bundles, which I will tell you right now, the reason that they did that was to keep their attach rate high. They did not have to sell them in bundles. They optionally sold them in bundles. The only time you have to sell something in a bundle is if it literally comes in a bundle with it. So like when you would go to buy like the Shadow of War Xbox One S, and is like a 1 or 2 terabyte. I think it's 1 terabyte. If you go and buy that, you literally have to purchase said bundle because that's what comes with the console. But in these situations, it was the GameStop wanted to keep its attach rate high, supposedly, so Nintendo would continue to send stores their shipments of Nintendo Switches. But we got the same amount of Nintendo Switches in my store that everyone else did, and I know their attach rate was higher. So I'm not necessarily certain that that's true, but it's just what we're told. It might have just been upper management, DM and above, telling us that to make, basically just pulling the wool over our eyes so we'd pull it over the customer's eyes. I'm not 100% certain, but it definitely seems to be a little bit sketchy. But once again, do not hate low-level employees in GameStop. Basically, like store managers and below, depending on what store manager you're talking to, they really might not have a choice in some of the things that they do. They might be risking their job to help customers, which is so ridiculous that you would think, oh, I'm risking my job to help a customer. But trust me, it is definitely not a bad place to work if you're thinking about it. Just make sure you go under the right manager. Worked for 2 managers, amazing people. They were great guys, and I really, really enjoyed it. And I know managers in my district now, or I guess the district that I live in now, that are fantastic. They're great people, and they really just want to make people happy. So what happened with these Nintendo Switches was the whole attach rate and everything. So when they came into GameStops, so that these GameStops would continue to get them as far as we knew. The store manager and like everyone else would gather things from the online bundles and put it together and only sell it that way. So it was really sketchy the way they did it. It really sucked because a lot of people wanted these Nintendo Switches, and if the only way they could buy it is in a bundle, they definitely kind of like spent money they didn't need to. We'd be told to bundle them with screen protectors and all sorts of stuff that was just kind of unnecessary. I would recommend a screen protector on your Switch, but it's not necessary unless you're really gonna play it a lot. I play my Switch rarely, and I mostly just leave it in the dock, which I have a microfiber cloth draped over it, so I know it's not going to scratch it. But if you're going to move it around a lot, I would recommend it just because it might get scratched in the dock, you might drop it, whatever. I don't know. It's not something you need to get, but there are really cool fiberglass ones that are awesome. They're like shatterproof. It's really cool, but some sketchy shit went on with the Nintendo Switch. I had my meatball boss at the time to get Switch pre-orders. He misled customers into what they were thinking were certain pre-orders. So one customer, he was told he was getting the Neon Switch because he really wanted it, but we were already out of the Neon Switch. So my manager pre-ordered him the just standard Switches, which is what I have, the gray Joy-Con Switch. He pre-ordered that one for this guy, and it ended up that manager got fired, and I was kind of like acting manager at the time of the Nintendo Switch launch, and I basically had to like get yelled at by this guy, which totally warranted. Absolutely, I would be pissed if I didn't get the Switch I wanted to, but I basically just had to endure this guy, and there was no way I could get him a Neon Nintendo Switch until like weeks later. My district manager was like, oh, I had one that I could have given you, and I'm like, why the fuck didn't you let anybody know that? I talked to several other employees, and they were like, yeah, I had no idea that he had a Neon Switch just in case. Like, what the fuck? Why wouldn't you tell people that on the night of the Switch launch? That's definitely something they needed to know. But it's kind of whatever. Shit happens. I felt really bad for this guy, but that was just kind of the sketchy shit that happens at GameStop. I mean, not necessarily sketchy shit, obviously. The unwarranted bundles, it's just that kind of stuff. The weird business practices, they would call it like pivoting, where they would essentially try to grab an item and put it in the hands of a customer because you're more likely to buy it if it touches your hands. There's also this super sketchy business practice called the assumptive sale technique. Now, if you've gone into a GameStop and they've done this to you, try not to be super pissed just because this is the way they're taught to do it. At least it was. I quit 5 months ago, so I would imagine they still do it. They would essentially assume that you wanted something if you had spoken about it at all, or if it would in the end benefit them, like the Power Up Rewards memberships or certain pre-orders or additional attaches. So that would be like additional Joy-Cons on a Switch, an additional controller, Xbox Live, PS Plus, anything like that. They would add it to, when you come up to the register, they would add it to your total, show it to you, and make a brief explanation of why it was on there. So essentially what would happen is if you went and God of War just came out, but let's say it hadn't come out yet, and if you spoke at all about how you were a God of War fan, they would be like, oh yeah, and I added this $5 on there for God of War, it's gonna get you this, couple skins, whatever. And then normally customers, they wouldn't do anything about it. They would just accept it and be like, oh, okay, cool, awesome, thinking they did you a solid, but really they just charged you $5 and they kind of duped you, which, I mean, I've seen people do it in a way that's not so. If they barely touch on it, that's sketchy. But I worked with a guy, he was super sincere about it, and this was about protection plans, the GPGs, which you don't always need to buy. If you scratch a lot of discs, yeah, do it. But if you don't scratch discs, especially Blu-rays, don't really worry about it. It's not a big issue, but GameStop employees they have to sell you this because it's something that they get rated on. So if they push it hard, it's because it's part of their job. They have to do it. There's an entire metric just for game protection. So just remember that when you go into a GameStop, that everything that they do or mention is literally part of their job. It is not something that makes them, I guess, look better. It's literally something that allows them to keep their job. So with game protections, I worked with a guy, great guy, super awesome. He basically would add them to people's stuff and then be like, oh yeah, and just to let you know, this right here is game protection. You can take it off if you'd like. It basically just covers you from scratches or breaks or anything for an entire year. Eventually, from what I understand, after talking to several GameStop employees after I already quit, he did get in trouble for that, which is so weird that this one specific guy that I worked with, got in trouble for it because he was like the best at it. He was super sincere and immediately told you if you didn't want it, you could take it off. Somebody eventually thought it was sketchy, which obviously, yeah, I understand that you would think that was sketchy, and they freaked out, called management or whatever. I've heard that he got in trouble, but he also said that he did not, so it's not a big deal. But I've heard that they're not necessarily supposed to do that anymore, but just sketchy shit will happen. Watch out when you pre-order items as well, because they can add the gameplay guarantees on there as well. You pre-order the gameplay guarantees, you pay for them in advance, so just keep an eye out. Always look at your receipts when you go into GameStops. I've heard bad things about people doing the assumptive sale, but literally like barely ever touching on anything that they added to it, and people not knowing that they added something to your stuff. So just always check your receipts and understand the return policy of GameStop and their trade policies. Just check the back of the receipt. Honestly, it's all listed on there. That's just one instance of some crazy shit that happened. Or I guess that's technically two of what I wanted to talk about, was the Nintendo Switch bundles and the assumptive sale. Now, the big issue that I had while working GameStop was with one manager. I already mentioned him earlier. I'm going to call him Meatball. Terrible manager. He was the worst. He basically did nothing. Literally, customers would come in and he would go in the back room. Like, he would just peace out and go in the back room so he didn't have to help them. But he would get 2 or 3 pre-orders in the day so that his numbers would be super high. So it always seemed like he was doing a great job, but when you looked at his numbers and my numbers were decent, his were amazing, but you looked at our transaction totals and mine was in the hundreds and his was in the dozens. So basically, I helped out hundreds of different people, possibly, and he would help out 1 or 2 people, get them what GameStop wanted them to have, and then basically just peace out for the rest of the day. He also like milked the time clock. He would leave and actually keep it on there. He did all sorts of fucked up shit. He didn't clock out on a break for 3 months, even though he would go on like hour-long lunches. It was crazy. And in the end, the only reason he got caught is because I specifically went to HR after being told by several managers not to go to my district manager, because there was no way this guy got the job essentially without having some in with our district manager. So I went over my district manager's head, which in retrospect was a bad idea. Never go over like your upper management's head, because they will get super pissed and it very much makes them look bad. That in the end was why, for the most part, I quit GameStop, was because I was straight up told by my manager that I was never going to be made a manager, a full-fledged manager, versus just being an assistant manager, because the person who made that decision was this district manager that I had essentially scorned, because not once but twice this had happened where he didn't notice something but I did. Essentially, the first time was my manager, Meatball, who would skim the clock. He would do all sorts of fucked up shit. He was super huge dick to customers. And then the second time was actually a different manager that was a super huge dick, and everyone hated him. Nobody understood how he continued to work there. From what I understand, he possibly had dirt on my district manager, and that's why he never got fired. But I can't say that for certain. It's just kind of a rumor. I mean, I doubt anybody who's watching this lives in my district, so you wouldn't really know. But he would do some sketchy ass shit, and in the end, what got him fired was I had a friend of a friend who ended up working at GameStop, and she was a previous customer of mine, come to me and be like, hey, I've worked for GameStop for a while and I haven't gotten paid. He was essentially having her do shifts, but she was literally never an employee of GameStop. She never did any like actual paperwork to get paid or anything. And he did this for 3 or 4 months that she worked there. And eventually he got caught because she told me, and then I, of course, took that to my district manager. But once again, it looked poorly on him because this guy had been doing it for months, and the only reason that he was basically told about it was because I was told about it. So that was 2 times, not to mention several smaller instances where shit would happen and people would tell me instead of them essentially telling him because I'm not necessarily sure. Maybe people thought that I could do something about it. I don't really know. The initial time was because it was literally my manager. The second time, I believe it was because this customer slash employee was a friend of a friend, and she was also my customer, so she was kind of like an acquaintance of mine. But in the end, I essentially scorned my district manager, and he made it kind of like his life's goal to not only not notice anything that I did, but to also just everything that I did basically say my manager did, and he hired my manager. My manager was great at this time, by the way. He did do a lot of amazing things. He basically turned our store around. It was crazy. He was awesome, and he's still awesome. I would definitely still work for him, but my district manager sucked ass. I would absolutely not work for him again. I've thought about possibly going back to GameStop, but one, I don't think I would get actually hired back because my district manager essentially blackballed me. I've actually heard from several other employees that still work there, because I'm on good standing with these other employees, that yeah, he blackballed me. Like he like talked shit about me. It was like hilarious, just the stories I hear about my district manager basically like trying to fuck my shit up, and I think it's hilarious now, because it's kind of petty. Like, I'm just a guy who works at GameStop, like, trying to do the good thing, and this guy, like, he made his career at GameStop, and he tried to destroy whatever career I might have, but really, like, I don't know what career I would ever have at GameStop, because I wasn't necessarily happy. I want to go into games, but I don't want to go into games that way. I don't want to be in games retail for the rest of my life. But these were just a couple of stories about the shit that happened while I worked at GameStop. There's a lot of other stuff that had happened, sketchy business practices, all sorts of stuff. I would also like to let you guys know that there are some great things that have happened while working at GameStop. Like, I personally, I had helped a lot of people out. I bumped up trade credit because somebody wanted something special and they really wanted it, and I was like, man, you're a really cool guy, I'll bump it up, kind of a thing. In the end, just remember that there are good people and bad people who work at GameStop, so don't just go in and immediately hate them. Give them a chance, make sure that they're good or bad people, and then kind of decide, because there are a lot of great people who work for GameStop. A lot of great people I know, and it's really not a bad place to work. So that's about it for this video. If you guys want more GameStop stories or anything, put it in the comments down below. I would absolutely love to do that, because I've got a bunch of stories to tell. These videos, I just didn't want them to run especially long, so that's why I didn't tell an assload of stories. But make sure you guys stay tuned. We post, or you guys may be Inc. episodes on Monday. Every Monday, we post just regular Fanboy Talks episodes, unboxings and such on Wednesdays and Fridays. I'm going to be doing a lot more games related content, so just stay tuned. Make sure you click that bell icon so you get notified of all of our upcoming videos. Thumbs up this video if you guys liked it. And something that I found that's really interesting, and Colin Moriarty is the only person I've ever seen do it on Colin's Last Stand. A great games journalist, no matter what people say. He's a great guy, really not bad. Trust me, he's a great guy. I've followed him forever. Yeah, it's an entirely different story, but he uniquely does something where he says thumbs down the video if you didn't like it. So feel free to do that. I guess it would be an incentive for me to make better videos. But I mean, if you're gonna thumbs down the video, leave a comment letting me know why you hated it, essentially. That would help me out a lot. Constructive criticism is really nice. Just throwing like dislikes or hating somebody and not allowing them to grow is just being a dick. So that's about it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.